Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Storyteller's Corner. I'm your host, Joshua T. Calkins Trilogy, also known as Byron Sidious. The boats have not been burned, but there are not many left. When it comes to cultural keystones and intellectual properties that have been flag bearers or standard bearers in the arena of popular culture since, I want to say, roughly the late 1970s through to the current day. A lot of hay has been made out of reboots, remakes, reimaginings. We've touched on this a number of times. One of the most common issues that we currently face in terms of entertainment and in terms of popular culture in television, films, books, comics, video games, is that everything seems to be either a retread or a revisit or a reimagining or a sequel of previously established lore. We see this in tabletop role-playing games as well. And it's rife in the traditional publishing realm as well. The concept of revisiting prior intellectual properties, franchises, or frameworks, narrative frameworks, is not new. We have seen this done over countless thousands of years with mythology, wherein you will have new versions of previous tales told in a new time frame to a new audience because of a differentiation in the culture of the audience presently receiving the material. This is not brand new. We have seen this before. But in the past, we have always been able to collectively, as a species, recognize, hey, this is not the version of this story that came before or that I heard when I was in place A, B, or C. The brothers Grimm came across this in their studies very early on, when they would hear a version of Hansel and Gretel in Germanic nations and territories versus when they would hear the tale as told by the Celts, as opposed to a very deep differentiation told by the French. There's all kinds of cultural, regional differentiations that divide which version of the story you're getting. And each version of a story serves a different purpose based upon who's telling the story, who's sharing it, who has adapted it. These are things that we, once upon a time, well understood, and we accepted it. But there was always an examination or a question probed of, well, which version are you telling me? I refer to the boats because that goes back to another myth. The ship of Theseus. When Theseus sets forth on his vessel, journeying around the world across the seas, over time he has to repair and replace bits and pieces of his vessel before returning home. By the time he returns home, every single piece of the ship has been replaced. The philosophical question posed by this thought exercise or this fable is it still the same ship? The ship that left. It's been replaced, every stick of it, every inch of it. The only thing that remains the same from when it departed is the crew. Is it therefore the same ship? Is it the same vessel? It's a curious thought exercise, and you can try to give a justification for why it is the same vessel, why it isn't the same vessel. But if we are looking at a materialist, straightforward, legitimately literal definition, no, it is no longer the same ship, because every piece has been exchanged and replaced with new pieces. No bit of the original ship outside of the crew manning the vessel is the same as when it left. The crew is the same. The ship is not. And that's a small point of delineation. It's a specific detail that can be used to argue in favor of saying, sure, it's the same ship, with an asterisk. There's a great big asterisk. Much as a few years ago, some dolts were trying to say that 2 plus 2 can equal 5, leaving out the asterisk if you add fractional amounts, like 0.5. It's 2.5 plus 2.5. Yes, that equals 5, or it can equal 5. But you can't leave that detail out. That's disingenuous. When it comes to our entertainment and our popular culture, intellectual properties, franchises, our legendarium, a common phrase that has come into recent parlance usage is they're wearing a skin suit. We see this applied to Star Wars, to Star Trek, to Doctor Who. We've seen it applied in a lot of fantasy and science fiction products and franchises that were once popular and much beloved, that have alienated entirely huge swaths of their original audiences. And, of course, we saw this in publishing years ago. It was quieter, it was subtler, because not as many people are engaged in reading as pop culture. Even though so much of pop culture gets adapted and crafted thanks to the source material. And actually, most of this. And we see it in video games too, where a popular franchise gets taken over by ideological wingnuts and used as a camouflage to try and smuggle in their ideological bent and messaging. There was a long time in debate circles where Sam Harris would effectively accuse people like Jordan Peterson of, quote-unquote, Jesus smuggling in the midst of their conversations, trying to insert scripture or scriptural theories or teachings, instructions, or concepts while discussing something completely removed from religion, that he would do a loose association or tie to a Judeo-Christian teaching to latch in the figure of Jesus Christ, and Sam Harris would call it out very loudly and angrily, even though there was not something being done that was nefarious. But it was a subtle tactic, a subtle technique. It's no longer subtle. It hasn't been subtle for a few years now, when folks on the agnostic / atheist, hard progressive leftists, have been utilizing the revenants, the raised dead of intellectual properties, to use them as carry vectors for their ideological messaging and pablum. There are a few problems that arise when it comes to our reactions as longtime fans or supporters of these old intellectual properties. We fall prey to nostalgia and to the slim hope that perhaps the original source material can be paid proper homage and brought to a new audience, because we don't want to see these properties fail. We don't want to see these concepts left in the dirt of history. We want them to be preserved for the next generation, to also enjoy and take away some kind of benevolent, meaningful messaging from. But that seems almost impossible, given how committed to the ideological messaging so many of the folks are who get involved in these franchises. It ends up putting me in mind of one of the most hated pieces of cinematic material in the last 2 decades. The Last Jedi, which deservedly is abhorred by longtime old school fans of the Star Wars franchise. The line is from Kylo Ren. It says, "Let the past die. Kill it if you must." I've been hearing a similar sentiment espoused by people in the culture war space who I typically enjoy or agree with in terms of their descriptors and assessments of what's been happening to popular culture, franchises, and intellectual properties. 2 come to mind primarily for me, one being the real-life fake wizard. Now listen, I like the guy. He's spot on in a lot of his analyses. And frankly, he critiques these things because he loves them and has loved them for a long time. He is trying to bring attention to the fact that many of these properties are being poisoned. There is a toxin in them that is absolutely destroying their original purpose and mission statement. And I love his line of cancel Disney Plus, because the House of Mouse is a psychological terrorist organization. They're just destroying everything that they used to do that was benevolent, that was good. But he is starting to lean into the just wipe it all out, destroy it all. This concept of just get rid of all of it. That sounds awfully familiar if you're a student of history. It reminds me of Mao saying we must kill the 4 olds. We must get rid of everything that came before for the glorious revolution. If your solution sounds an awful lot like the same homicidal mania put forth by Chairman Mao, you might want to think a few more minutes longer about your suggested proscription for how to move forward. Yes, these intellectual properties have been completely captured by people who hate you and who want nothing more than to use your nostalgia and member berries as a pry bar to weasel your money out of your wallet to help fund their further programs and policies to fund and support their nonsense, which is accelerationist commie gobbledygook. You're only helping them if you are joining on the bandwagon of saying, yeah, let's just burn it all, get rid of it. Yes, there is an infection. But do you know how you cure the patient? You don't treat the patient by cutting off his head. You figure out a game plan for how to contend with the infection. Part of that is pointing out that first, there is a problem. Yes, we are aware of that. But something else that real life fake wizard has been saying and promoting, and good on him for this, he's been telling people, make your own things. We need to make our own materials. We need new franchises, new properties, new stories. And he's absolutely right. He is absolutely correct in that regard. I've been doing my part for close to 20 years. I'm not very good at promoting my own material, but I've been doing my part to try and make the material. Best of fucking luck getting anybody to cover it, though, or discuss it, or even look at it. Because if you don't have an idea of marketing, which I am terrible at, self-promotion, I've admitted that so many times, it's obnoxious. But it really is difficult to say, on one hand, hey, make new stuff. Okay, are you going to cover anybody's new stuff? Not unless they pay us for it. You're doing the exact same thing that fuck people over before. That's exactly why we didn't have backup material or franchises to turn to. Because no one's willing to support each other than to try and promote their own shit. It's this self-destructive selfishness, this I need to be king shit on top of the mountain. Look at what happened to the Daily Wire. They were king of the heap for how long? A couple of years there. But because they were unwilling to work with people who weren't in their tightly controlled legal department's bubble, they're crumbling. Why? Because they don't care about actually preserving the culture. They just want to be the king of their own little fiefdom. There is a degree to which some of the collective working together can be effective. It's called communitarianism. Not communism, communitarianism. Having each other's backs. This is the whole reason that a military works. I know I'm all over the place, and I'm sorry to be scatterbrained about this. Trust me, I'm going to get back to on topic here. We'll get this figured out. My point is, he has been saying, effectively, burn it all, start fresh. My colleague, Ryan Roger Athay, and his protege, Digny, the dignified cartoon gentleman over at the network, have been saying much the same thing. That all of these old things must die. You sounded a little like Mao, Ryan. Are you a commie? I know you're not. I know you hate commies. Just going to take that little jab, though. Because it's fine and dandy to put out descriptors, much as you'd like. We need to. We need to point these things out when they're happening. But then there has to be a follow-up, a follow-along of, well, here's what we can do to supplant all that. New properties, new franchises, new worlds of fiction to engage in take time and effort to construct and build up. These things don't just fall out of the fucking sky. They take a degree of time and effort to put together. Trust me, I know. I've been trying to work on establishing the Amelia City stories as a horror franchise on my own for years. The same with the Templarian Tales fantasy novels that I've been writing since 2007. They take time. And I'm just working alone. There are people who are putting together brilliant intellectual properties for people to engage in and engage with and enjoy, who have small teams that are working together to try and put these things out there. Encourage and support those as much as you can, whether it be through word of mouth, through networking, through helping with advertising, sharing links to these people's projects or their websites and what have you. Even when it comes to things like comic books. Got my issue 4 Mega Man X. This is an intellectual property that's been around for a while. Mega Man and Mega Man X, owned and operated by Capcom. The comic book series is being put together by a small indie press called Udon Publishing, working in partnership with Capcom. Yes, Capcom is a big corpo, and I'm not going to sit here and try to act as their shield, because they've done some dumb shit too. But what this represents is the in-between. That step in between burning it all down that Ryan and Fake Wizard have leaned toward, and preparing the ground, the new fertile soil, for new properties. It's a legacy IP being handled by a small independent team. We need things like this to serve as a middle ground, a ferry ground or a ferry vessel to take us over to the new realm, that new territory, to start fresh. Also picked up my issue 2 of Ninja Penguin by Mr. Russ Duggar. So, haven't read that yet, but I will. But you guys talk about killing it all, destroying it, wiping it out in order to start fresh, to not be manipulated by our nostalgia and our memories of the good things we had before. There's plenty of myths and tales and legends that have lasted hundreds or thousands of years. Should we give these up too? Should we get rid of our world-building mythos? Should we forget entirely the lessons that we receive from the fiction from people who have never even been recorded by name? Part of the reason why things like the SCP Foundation projects are so beloved. It's current mythology, familiar tales, structured in a bizarre kind of supernatural setting and framework, like supernatural sci-fi framework, much of it predicated upon or based on old world mythologies, given a new kind of coat of paint. But it's a collective project that is not owned or controlled by a singular entity. It's a collaborative project available and accessible to the public. A lot of us seem to have forgotten that that sort of thing used to be what kept cultures and groups of fans together. It's when there wasn't someone dangling the keys of ownership over a story saying, you can't tell that story or you got to pay me cut me a royalties check. We're terrified of even faintly referencing these stories that are held by the giant corpos, because they will absolutely breathe fire and bring down all hell on your head unless you use their material in such a way that you don't make a personal profit, that you don't make any money off of it. Then they don't give a shit and they can't do anything about it, because then that becomes fan fiction and it's not a commercial product. Some of us are going to have to suck it up and do a lot of work without compensation. Why do you think I do anything in the arena of fan fiction? Because these stories and these properties are still beloved and deserve decent storytellers to work with them. And it's just going to have to be a case where some of us have to take the hit. I'm willing to take that hit. I'm hoping there's some other folks who are willing to take that hit. And if the material that is produced by these fan fiction storytellers or artists is of a sort that you don't like because of the messaging, tell them, hey, this is shit because you're inserting or injecting your personal ideological messaging into it. Fuck off. Downvote it. Don't engage with it anymore. Get away from that particular fan fiction creator. When there's no feedback, they'll get the message. You can't just destroy it all, guys. Some of it has to hang on just long enough for us to get the new material put together and on its feet. In the meantime, we're going to have to use a similar tactic to the ship of Theseus and just make a new ship that looks like the old one, but has a different crew as well. Hopefully this wasn't too scattershot, and the mixed messaging and mixed symbols will make sense in the aftermath. I guess I'm just trying to caution Ryan and Wizard against falling prey to the very thing that Kylo Ren said. Don't kill the past. We still need it. We also need to point out where it's being used against us. Cheers.